Here we have a comment from Emoji who says that more Republicans and Democrats would vote independent before voting their duopoly twin.
Hmm. If they had the chance to, I believe they would.
Yeah,
And in so many states, it's very hard to vote for a third party or independent candidate. I lived in Texas for 25 years, and we couldn't even, and in Oklahoma, Ralph Nader couldn't get on the ballot here in Oklahoma. The Libertarian Party fought for years to get ballot access in Oklahoma and only got it in 2016. So third party and independent candidates, it's just such a hard road, and in some states, impossible to get ballot access. He would have to be like a write in candidate in some states.
right.
It's a hard road. Hard
So
road.
if we're talking about Bobby still, okay, let's assume he wins the nomination of whichever party. Um, and since you're forming a sort of shadow cabinet here, uh,
Hmm.
who are we going to put on the VP, Lori? Then
Oh boy.
so
I
much,
think
so
about
much to
that a
choose
lot.
from.
Well, you know who my dream VP would be is
Mhm.
Tulsi Gabbard. I'm
Yep.
a Tulsi girl. I love her. I think she'd be a great complement to Bobby, and she's got, congressional experience. She's got military experience. She's got incredible wisdom for her age, and I think, my dream would be to have her as vice president, and after 8 years of Kennedy, we'd have a President Tulsi Gabbard. Mhm.
That would be a welcome change from Kamala Harris right now.
Oh,
We would say
yes.
we can do better. We have women. We have intelligent women. We have women who
Mm.
put America first. No, that'd be interesting. I mean, Tulsi has been a star for a long time. Also, a big fan base here in Poland. I've seen even films with her with Polish translations on YouTube and another social media outlets. But yeah, that would definitely be an interesting ticket
Might
with
be
Kennedy
awkward
and
for
Tulsi.
her, though, coming back to the Democratic Party after she left. She made a big show out of, leaving the Democrats, so she'd have
Yeah,
to come back. I don't know if she'll do that.
and then Tucker Carlson for White House spokesperson. I'm
Oh,
guessing.
oh, wow. Ooh, that'd be cool.
So I mean,
Well,
we can
Tucker makes
go.
too much money to do a job like that, though.
Well, it depends where your loyalties, right? Some people say it's all
Yeah,
about the Benjamins. Some people say it's about America, which I hope they all are good politicians have their countries in their hearts. But
good point.
if
Good
I were to
point.
go forward, I mean, so I'm taking this cabinet. You have Bobby, you have Tulsi, you have
Mm,
Tucker as the spokesperson, and then obviously we have Scott Ritter and Doug McGregor in the Pentagon making policy or in the State Department. I
mhm.
mean, wow,
That's right.
the opportunities for
Mhm.
peace, so great, so great. One of the reasons why a lot of you may be asking why a guy in Poland is so interested in American politics and RFK, well, let me tell you why. Because we are literally on the front line of a potential war with Russia. Our politicians in Warsaw are neocon, completely neocon, and the only way, the reason why I'm sort of pushing this America-centric theme on my shows is because what happens in Washington will reverberate deeply in Warsaw, whether we like it or not. That's why it's in our national interest, to all the Polish audience out there, that we need a sensible peace candidate in the White House who's not going to push us towards a war with Russia and then basically to leave us to die as all the Western allies did in World War II. So let's not
That's
make the
right.
same mistake again, guys. The less warmongering the candidate, the better. It's not 1980. It's not Ronald Reagan warning in America. Times are changed. It's Russia, not the Soviet Union. So I think the more the Polish audience gets interested and sends these vibes to a potential candidate and to Bobby that, hey, we're for you in the sense that, yeah,
Mhm.
what you got to do in America is your business, but your foreign policy takes us away from the precipice of war with Russia, then you have our support also. That I think I needs to be said, because I did the same thing in 2016. People were asking, why the hell are you so interested in the Trump? I mean, what does Trump have to do with Poland? I'm like, well, he has a lot to do with Poland, because depending on if he has a successful summit with Putin or not, that'll
Mm.
determine our entire foreign policy for the next 4 years. So
At least.
at
At
least,
least.
at least, unless we
Mhm.
untangle ourselves from the American web and look more realistically at the world and align with the multipolarity that's rising. But since
Mm.
we are so interconnected with Washington, the character and the foreign policy line of the candidates for president should be very important to every poll currently. Um,
Especially polls of military age,
yes,
because you guys are going to be next on the front lines when Ukraine runs out of men.
Indeed. As a matter of fact, there is a book which has just been released by two great authors. One is a friend of mine, Mr. Tomasz Budzyński. This is specifically for the Polish audience, and Wojciech Sumliński, one of Poland's great investigative reporters, sort of like our Cy Hirsch.
Hmm.
And in that book, apart from my comments, which they quote extensively, there is an unclassified report from the equivalent of our FBI, the ABW Security Service, where they talk about the potential of a Polish-Ukrainian union, which a
Uh-oh.
lot of people are talking about openly. Apparently, there's a treaty being worked out, and our current political leadership is already saying that they've changed tones in the last 2 months. They said, okay, yeah, Ukraine is not going to win this, so we might have to agree to a hard compromise. And part of this hard compromise is building a Polish Ukrainian entity. This is being apparently seriously discussed between
Mm-hmm.
Warsaw and Kiev as an anti Russian bulwark.
Mm.
Now, combining Poland with all our problems, with the corrupt hellhole that is Ukraine, is going to swamp us. And anybody who doesn't see it is blind. This is something we need to take seriously. And I think this is one of those things that we need to communicate also to the American audience and to American voters, that this is not in our interest. Please do everything you can or bring this issue up, because at the end of the day, a Polish Ukrainian union state
Mm.
aimed against Russia brings nuclear war closer, not further, because the ideology behind it is to be the character of this union state is to be anti-Russian and not
Right.
some neutral, Western Ukrainian Polish state. But I got a little
Mm.
bit ahead of myself. Lori, let's get
Well,
back to
that
the states.
yeah, that kind of scares me because, historically speaking, the Poles and the Ukrainians have a very complicated relationship.
To say the least. I hail
Yeah.
from southeastern Poland. Trust me, I know. I have
Mm,
personal family experience of what Banderites did to people there
mm,
during World War II and after World War II, and how families were literally split up because, for example, somebody in the family was hiding a Jew in a barn, and the cousin, for example, was in the UPA, in the Ukrainian nationalist movements.
mhm.
And after years, somebody would say to somebody, "You know what? If I knew you were hiding that Jewish woman in the barn, I would kill you without hesitation, because loyalty to the idea is much more important to me than family." That's how sick the
Mm.
dynamics worked at that time in southeastern Poland and what is now Western Ukraine, Volhynia, which thankfully
Volodya.
Scott Ritter talks about a lot, and not only Scott,
Yeah.
but over 100,000 people massacred in ways you can't imagine, even.
Mm.
So yeah,
Unfortunately, I was just watching that episode of The Unknown War the other night, and I saw the films.
right.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, it it's obviously a lot of fictionalized aspects to it, but it does relate to a historical event. There's a movie by Wojciech Smarzowski. I think you can find it with English subs, which was in theaters about 3 years ago. It's called Volhynia, or Wołyń in Polish, and talks about a Polish Ukrainian couple being divided by the entire situation after 1943. So highly recommend it.
Mm.
It's pretty
That sounds
bloody,
good.
so rated R. Don't watch it with your children, but
Right?
you'll get a feel for what happened with the guys who later hooked up with the CIA for the entire duration of the Cold War, and then came
Mm.
out in 2014 in force after that famous call between
That's
Nuland
right. Yeah, I've
and
been
Jeffrey
writing about
Pyatt.
that a hell of a
Yes,
lot this past year because
yes,
I'm desperately trying to wake up my fellow Americans to the real history. I mean,
right,
some of my fellow Americans get the fact that this war didn't start in February of 2022. They know the history, at least of the Maidan coup, and they know that it dates back over about a decade. But a lot of them, I'd say most of them, just don't know that this love affair between the CIA and the Nazis in Ukraine actually started practically as soon as World War II was over in 1945. It even predates the CIA. It was military intelligence that was recruiting a lot of these guys. And then when the CIA was founded in 1947, Alan Dulles just welcomed those Ukrainian Nazis into his loving arms and started, arming them, funding them, using them for guerrilla warfare to affect regime change in the Soviet Union. And by the way, that whole program was an utter and complete failure.
right.
The CIA is not proud of of their work in Ukraine for a few decades there, because all their agents that they placed into the Soviet Union were quickly captured
Yeah.
by the Soviets, and most of them were executed. And of course, the Soviets killed Stefan Bandera in 1959.
Yeah, and a lot of I mean, the fundamental question is why did they kill him in Munich? What was he doing in Munich, right?
What was he doing in
Who was
Munich?
protecting him in Munich? So,
I know the
you know,
answer to that.
he wasn't in Warsaw, he wasn't in Moscow, he was there, he wasn't in Kiev. Yeah,
Yep.
you're right. In essence, what we're seeing is being played out. It's like failed CIA Ukraine Operation Part 2, like hot shots, right? But
Like they think
unfortunately,
it's going to work better this time.
yeah. Well, it's yeah, the CIA. Lori, going back to JFK, and you've done great work on the assassination research with Jim DiEugenio. I saw the podcast on the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, thank you
Really
for
great
watching that.
stuff. Highly recommended. What new aspects ever since Trump released the documents? Obviously, not all the documents, but there were some interesting snippets in them. What new things have we learned that those documents possibly contributed to about Oswald, about Giancana, about Chicago, the Cubans, anything that before, for example, 2017 wasn't so obvious to the average researcher? What can you comment on that?
I'm still pouring through documents that were released in 2017, 2018, because
Hmm.
there were thousands and thousands and thousands of them. It's been enough to keep researchers occupied. And everyone's got their little field of expertise, their niche that they're interested in. But I think the most stunning revelation, at least to me, that came out of I think it was the 2018 document dump, was that the mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell, was the brother of Charles Cabell at the CIA, who was involved in all the anti-Castro Cuban operations. He was fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs.
Right.
So he was an enemy of President Kennedy. And it just so happened that the mayor of Dallas, Texas, on November 22nd, 1963, was his brother, Earl Cabell. Now, we knew that. But what we didn't know until it was confirmed in a document that was finally declassified 5 years ago was that Earl Cabell was also CIA. He was a CIA agent. And that's troubling for a lot of reasons. As mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell would have had a lot of say in the motorcade route.
Right.
He had a lot to do with that. And the cover up, of course, because he would have had control over the police department. And it's also just troubling that an active CIA agent was the mayor of a major American city. And it makes you wonder, how many politicians are we going to find out 50 years from now, 60 years from now? How many of our current politicians are we going to find out later are actually CIA agents? Makes you wonder.
Indeed, it's sort of like the Freemasons. You find out after they're dead only that they were Freemasons.
That's right. That's right.
It's an interesting development. I've noticed
Yeah.
because obviously I know, and I'm pretty sure among our audience, a lot of people follow Cy Hirsch's work.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you this for about a week now because I've noticed Jim DiEugenio did a long essay, an expose on some of the things that Cy got wrong in his reporting on Camelot. Now, I want to disassociate this.
Don't get me started. You want to get me
I
started
want
on
to get
that?
you started. Exactly. So
All right.
let's not talk about pipelines right now getting blown up. That's a different story.
That's another
But
story.
a lot of people do think that Cy's Camelot, the dark side was really revisionist history, but
Mhm.
it was factual. It was based on facts. I'm just beginning, and I'm a historian by trade. I'm slowly looking into all of these things. But for our audience, can you just flesh out the main points that Jim pointed out where Cy just completely got it wrong on JFK,
Phew. Hard to
or
do
at least
this
some of
briefly.
the main points, or one main
I'll give
point,
you
for
a few
example.
points.
Yeah.
Um, what bothered me about the dark side of Camelot is that Cy Hirsch, and this could also tie into his Nord Stream reporting. Cy has a lot of sources that he taps inside the CIA, the intelligence community. And since 1963, there's been a variety of cover stories, what I would call false sponsors in spy jargon, for the Kennedy assassination. There's the Castro did it theory, there's the
Right.
mob did it theory, there's the Lyndon Johnson did it theory. And they're all kind of meant to distract you. Look over here, look over there. Just don't look at the CIA,
Yeah.
right? Look anywhere but here at the CIA. Unfortunately, though, the sources that Cy uses for a lot of his work are agency people who often feed him malarkey stories, which he then prints as the gospel. And many of his stories in The Dark Side of Camelot, specifically involving the Castro plots, are just
Mhm.
balderdash. They're straight out of the agency talking points. And
Just to interdict,
mhm.
Castro plots that were apparently initiated by the Kennedys, right?
Mm, no,
Th-
that's where
th-
I would disagree.
No, no. The question is, does Psy frame it in that regard? That
Oh,
it was,
yes,
yeah,
he
he's
frames
framing
it
it
that
as,
way.
yeah,
He
yeah, yeah.
tries to
Okay,
blame
mhm.
it on Bobby
Right,
Kennedy and Jack
right,
Kennedy, that they were trying to kill Fidel Castro.
right.
But the evidence just doesn't add up. You see that it's exactly the opposite. You see, especially in the last few months of the Kennedy presidency, there were many efforts being made, back channel efforts to calm the tensions with Cuba and with the Soviet Union, which of course upset the CIA greatly because these were their pet projects. Kennedy pissed off all the right people, and one of those people was Alan Dulles, who I believe is, Kennedy's probably real killer. Not the guy who pulled the trigger,
Right.
but the guy who ran the operation ultimately.
What do you think? I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Ghost. It's about James Jesus Angleton.
Angleton, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, I came off watching also an interesting series. It's called A Spy Among Friends, where Angleton is portrayed as this American, well, he
Hmm.
was an American head of operations at CIA, but he was a good friend of Ken Philby. And this series deals, I think it's a 6-part miniseries. You can find it online. I think it's on HBO. Whereby Angleton was a good friend of Philby's. Philby obviously did what he did. He defected to the Soviet Union. Angleton was apparently very angered by this. To the end of his life, he devoted to finding the one mole in the CIA, which he couldn't find,
Yes.
but apparently was always there. But there's a if Dulles, I mean, I have no doubt to believe, it seems would be the godfather of the plot, used his position to liquidate Kennedy. I'm pretty sure Angleton would have had a hand in this
Mm.
because Angleton knew everything and everyone. In that book, The Ghost, by the way, I forgot the author's name right now. But it's a really deep dive into a very peculiar figure in American history. Have you seen any, or what from your perspective, any information about Angleton being involved in all of this?
Oh,
What are you
sure.
hearing? Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I must say that Angleton is not my particular wheelhouse, my field of expertise on the case. I think there are probably other researchers who could give you a better
Hmm.
picture of what his role in this thing was, but he was definitely in that inner circle of what I would call sort of rogue CIA,
Right.
who despised Kennedy, despised his foreign policy, felt that he had to be stopped at all costs. And they certainly had plenty of practice in the assassinations department, right? They had
Yeah.
taken out several leaders of other countries. It is certainly not beyond the realm of possibility or imagination that they could have just as easily have taken out our president. They had every means, motive, and opportunity to do it.
Lori, another interesting thread that you put out there related to a book written by your current Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. I
Mm,
think it was in the late 80s. If you could
mhm.
just bring our audience up to speed on what was written in that book by Anthony Blinken and why it's relevant today, because I think that's a very interesting topic.
Well, it is, and it's a really interesting story. I'll try to give you the short version. A lot of people don't realize, or they might not be old enough to remember, that the Nord Stream pipeline wasn't the first time that the United States had sabotaged and blown up a Russian natural gas pipeline headed from Russia to Europe. We did this before, back in 1982, We sabotaged the Trans-Siberian pipeline, which was carrying natural gas to Europe. And of course, much like with Nord Stream, there was a great uh, political back and forth between Europe and the United States and NATO, specifically about doing business with Russia and letting Russia have control over that much of their energy market. We were trying to get in the middle of that, drive a wedge between our NATO allies and the Soviet Union at that time. So, yeah, we literally blew up that pipeline. At the time, it was the largest non nuclear explosion on planet Earth in history. It was huge. Fortunately, no one was killed. It was out in the middle of remote Siberia. But it was sending a message to the Soviets that we can destroy your vital infrastructure and your economic lifeline to Europe. And then we did it again. We pretty much followed the exact same playbook, 40 years later in 2022 in last September, when I believe we sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline. So, what do those two events have in common? What's the connecting thread? It's a guy named Antony Blinken, who's our current Secretary of State. Back in 1987, he wrote a book about the Trans-Siberian pipeline and the international kerfuffle over that. And the book was called Ally versus Ally. And it was actually his college thesis. He was like a international law student at Harvard when he wrote
Mhm.
that. And I guess the foreign policy wonks saw something special in this young man. They thought he had his finger on the pulse. So they gave him a book deal and they published his college thesis as a book. And it's a pretty rare book today, but you can still find it. You can read it free at the Internet Archive. And it's a really interesting read once you see what just happened with Nord Stream. You kind of go, you know?
Anthony Boom Boom Blinken, or Anthony
I
Pipeline
like
Go
that.
Bye Bye Blinken. Yes. Um,
He's such a liar.
yeah,
Such a liar.
he is. I think right now, Ray McGovern makes the point that the best and brightest. I even think during the Vietnam War, those guys were more best and more brightest than the current crop that you're seeing in the White House, which
Good
can be
point.
compared to Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Sullivan, Blinken, and Newland, in essence.
Wink and
Well,
blink and a nod.
Lincoln, Blinken,
That's
and
what I
Todd.
call him.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
No, this is a really good deep dive. I'm happy to have you on our show today, Lori. I know we've got an hour. I was just wondering.
Are we out
One,
of time already? That was a
no,
fast hour.
we still got a couple of minutes,
Oh,
but
good. I'm enjoying this.
I know some of our audience is enjoying this. As a matter of fact, we have a comment here also from an eccentric uncle. This live stream is perfect preparation for my family gathering tomorrow. Thank you, Komoji. Excellent.
It's great.
It's all about building networks and communities. And we also have a
Mm.
comment from Tride. I think this is in relation to the Kennedy assassination. He says, and don't look at Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay.
Mm. There you
Uh,
go.
the one who apparently said during the Cuban Missile Crisis, "You're in a pretty bad fix, Mr. President." And JFK
Mm.
responded, "Well, in case you haven't noticed, you are in it
So
with
are
me."
you.
Exactly.
That's you're right there with me.
Yeah. LeMay, by the way, he was George Wallace's VP candidate, right?
He sure
After,
was.
a couple of years later, I
Yes.
remember.
Yeah.
What a
You have a good memory.
combination
Exactly
that
right.
was. Um,
Hmm.
in terms, maybe just going back to the Republican side for now, because
Mm.
I just want to get your projection. Do you think Ron DeSanctimonious, as many call him, is going to run, or has he finally realized that, with all of Trump's faults notwithstanding, he doesn't have a chance? What's your reading of the situation?
Everyone, all my Republican friends who are connected keep telling me Ron's going to run. Wait for it. He's going to run. Any minute now, he's going to announce his candidacy. I had several tell me he was going to announce last week. And
Hmm.
again, it didn't happen. Every time they say it's going to happen, it doesn't happen. If he's wise, he'll stay out of this race. I kind of feel like DeSantis is the just in case candidate,
Right.
just in case Trump goes to prison or just in case, Trump falls on his face. There's always those just in case candidates because the Republican Party really doesn't like Donald Trump. The party apparatus They hated him in 2016. He had to do a hostile takeover of the Republican Party. The neocons running the party detested him. And they still do. And they would probably love to have someone else this time as their nominee. I think they feel like Trump's just got too much baggage. He brings too much scandal with him. They're not looking forward to another 4 or 8-year presidency where he's getting impeached every year and a half and, dragging the country through one scandal after another. I think that Republicans have the same fatigue with Donald Trump as Democrats did with Bill Clinton.
Right.
By the end of Clinton's 8 years, it was just like, oh God, please no more of this. This guy is just nothing but one scandal after another. So if they had a better option, they might just take it. But I don't think DeSantis is that man. He doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the likability that Trump does to his followers. I just don't think that DeSantis has got it. I'm sure he'd love to be Trump's VP. Maybe Trump would select him as a running mate.
From my personal vantage point, kind of hard to see after the back and forth between them. But who knows?
Well, yeah,
These things happen.
But
These
you
things
remember,
happen.
yeah, I mean, the one guy that Trump didn't fight with of all his challengers back in 2016 was Mike Pence. So he
True.
chose Mike Pence.
Right.
Trump likes a yes man.
Yeah.
As his backup. And I don't think he wants a guy like Bobby Kennedy. Roger Stone was floating the idea that we could have a Trump Kennedy unity ticket.
Well,
and Bobby just threw cold water on that one the other day.
After he threw cold water on that one, Bannon on his Getter account said, "Oh, we'll come back in a year. We'll see what you're saying." So,
oh, did he really? I didn't see
yeah.
that.
He did. So come back in a year, Bobby, and we'll see what's happening. Because
That's right.
apparently, Bannon was also the one who actually brought him initially to meet with Trump at Bedminster, I think, when they were considering him for the
Vaccine Safety
Commission, right?
So
I think that old Democrat awoke in Bannon. That obviously, unfortunately, didn't materialize. But it was a pretty interesting comment. We'll see what happens in a year. But you know what? I mean, let's
never say never in politics, my friend.
Never say never in politics. And I mean, you have Ron DeSantis, but let's not forget, you also have the sage in the person of Nikki Haley. Let's not forget about Nikki Haley. What's she running at? 0.03%.
Everybody forgot about her already.
Exactly. Poor old Nikki out there trying to make a point, trying to resurrect neoconservatism in 2023. Wow. People are really detached from reality in that aspect. But
yeah, they are.
It's good to see some are grounded. Lori is grounded, as audience you can see. Bobby is grounded. I hope I'm grounded. And we'll see where things move forward. Lori, thank you so much for taking the time to the hearing. The stream was pretty good. Your roof isn't perfect to interfering.
I just hope that my internet wasn't cutting in and out. I hope you guys could understand me okay.
I don't know that in there, but I think we got the message across. Tap the like button, give us a subscription, and I hope to see you all soon and Lori on our program. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, you guys.